we can adopt. Thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. Well, first of all, thank you very much, EuroPython, for hosting me. I think this is one of the hardest conferences because you don't only have to compete with the rest of the speakers, but as well with the beach. I'm surprised to see I have that many people here. So my name is Mario Corchero. I work at Bloomberg. I'm a Python developer, and I work in news automation. If you want to speak about my company or Spain, because I'm Spanish, or the PyCon Spain, or anything else, I'll hang around afterwards. So today we are going to speak about logging. We'll have a brief introduction on why should you log, how logging works, how can you use it, how do you configure it. We'll try to do a little code demo. So I'm going to be jumping, going forth, and then some sample use cases that you can implement on top of logging. And then we'll have some time, well, we'll try to have some time for Q&A. So first of all, well, we can do a full talk on why logging matters, but in brief, I see documentation as the information you give to the rest of the developers when they are coding, and I see logging as the information that you give to the developers and the sysadmin when your application is running. This is one of the things that we usually don't care that much about, right? We put all kind of logging trash, and then when we have an issue, we really wish that we had the proper logs. So, about why should you use logging instead of, for example, just printing blah, blah, blah around all your code. First of all, well, some people actually say that if you have to use a debugger, that's a smell that you are not using logging properly. I don't know if you want to go that extreme, but using logging instead of printing, it gives you a lot of benefits. It's much versatile and configurable. It's really beautiful how it splits the how you log from the what you log. And if you have a multi-threaded environment, it will work compared to print, which have some issues to it. I'm trying to come with all the notes I had in my slides, so bear with me. And there are more things, I promise, but you can check the slides afterwards. So how logging works in Python. Python, well, is there any Java developer in the room? You can put your hands. This is not the C++ conferences. We are not going to hit you or anything like that. We respect people. This is Python environment. Okay, so if you're familiar with Apache Log4j, Python was built, the Python logging model was built with that in mind, following that standard. So we're going to see all different elements on the logging model. So the first of all is, on the logging library, we have loggers. Loggers are your main weapon to be able to log anything. They just allow you to pass a string and whatever arguments you have with a category. You know that this is going to call the logger object, and some log line is going to go to a string, like to the console or a file, right? I'm going really quickly because I don't know what's next. Okay, so yeah, but it's not just like that. So the logging model is actually creating a logging record, which is an object that is going to shuffle everything in it, and that object is actually what's going to be logged. And you might be wondering, but okay, if that's an object, how is the object actually going to the console or to the file? So that's where we use handlers, okay? So we have seen logger subject, like logger records, logger objects, and now you are seeing handler. Handler are the instances that are objects that allow you to print things to a file or to the console. There are many loggers there are many handlers already in the built-in logging model. For example, you can log to a file, you can log to console, you can log via HTTP. You can send things to a socket, you can send them via email. And I know I'm missing one. It's in the notes, check the slides. So now we say, we are going to create a logger object. We're going to call info on it, or whatever category you want to log on. We pass all the information. That's going to call the code that lives in the logger class, which is going to create the log record, and it's going to pass it to the handler, which is going to do its magic. It's going to emit it with its code, and it's going to transform it into, it's going to put it into a file or into the screen. And you might wonder, but how does the handler knows how to put all this beautiful log record information into a file? So that's where we have formatters. Formatters are going to mix all the information in that you have in the logger record, and they are going to give you back a string. Okay, so we said we have a logger object we call info or whatever category in it with all the information. That's going to go to the logger code. The logger code is going to create the logger record. The logger record is going to pass it to the handler. The handler will call its formatter, which will give you back a string, and then you can pass it to a file or a function or whatever, right? So we know how logger works. On top of all this, we have filters. I'm going to just spend 30 seconds of them. Filters are a way to be able to, is a really flexible tool to be able to filter logs in some predefined conditions. By default, I mean, the default logger is not that much useful, but you can create your own ones, and it allows you to attach those ones to your loggers and to your handlers to filter out some loggers that you might not want to log. So we said, we create the logger, we pass the information, it goes to the code of the logger, it checks the filters. If all the filters return true, cool. We emit the log record that we just created, it goes to the handler also has some filters. If that passes, then we format the log record, we get back the string, and we send it out to wherever we decide. Great. We also have the log hierarchy, okay? So what is the log hierarchy? So we haven't seen so far how do we actually create the logger. All the loggers are defined with that factory function, which is called a getLogger, and it allows you to pass a string, which is a dot-separated naming convention. So for example, here we can see we're creating parent.child, and what that means is that here we are defining the child logger, which is a child of the parent logger, and so on, if you were to create the longer one. Okay, so now we have the final one, right? So we create the logger, we know how to. Now we log something, it goes to the logger code, it goes through the filters. If it's all good, then we go to the handler section, which is we emit the log record, goes to the handlers, blah, blah, blah. But then also, if the logger has an attribute called propagate, it will go to its parents and emit the log record, following again this same flow. Will it execute the filter code? No. This is a great pitfall that I have fallen many times. So it will just execute this part of the parents. So what the hierarchy means is that once you have, when you call all your handlers, you're going to call the handlers of your parents. It's not that you're going to call your parent. It's just you're going to call the handlers of your parents. Also, another way that the hierarchy impacts is that if you don't set the level on a logger, it will use the parents one. Okay, so we know how logger works, right? More or less. There's just two more conditions. I promise this is the final one, okay? So on top of that, loggers can be enabled or disabled, and you have the category, which is also in the handler, but this is more or less the whole workflow. If you don't trust me, you can go to the documentation, which you have this other one, which is kind of the same. Okay, so we know how a logger works, right? But let's see how we use this huge implementation, this huge base code. So here we can see how can we log some stuff. This is how you, as a developer, we just log things. This is the what you log, not the how you log it. I think this is, I love this way of separating the concern of how you log things from what you log things. You are usually fine separating them, but yeah. So we just import login, we get a logger, we use the name. So you can use the name of the model, which so name is, it will give you the full path of the model that you're using. So for example, let's say you have project one, and then a folder called folder one, and then a file one. This will be project one if they are Python models. Folder one, project one, folder one, file one. So it gives you by default a really nice and beautiful hierarchy that follows your file hierarchy. We log a debug. So we have different categories: debug, info, error, and critical. We have a debug log that we just usually want to see maybe in our tests or maybe in our development server. We do actually some execution. We catch an exception. We do log exception. This is not a new category. This is just error, but passing xinfo. And xinfo is going to log all the information it has, like the traceback and all the information it has about the exception. So we can do the same with other categories by just forcing xinfo to be true. And if you're wondering, oh my God, I love this traceback thing. I want to see it as well in all the logs. From Python 3.2, I believe, don't quote me on that, you have this stack info attribute that you can pass when you log, which will also print all the stack. Okay, cool. Now, some things I wished I knew when I started, things I should not do with login is, if you do this, even if it's debug, it's gonna format and it's gonna use, This has a computational cost formatting the string if you don't use it. So just pass the template and then pass the argument that you want to put in the placeholders. If you don't like this kind of string notation, the formatters have different types. I have 10 minutes, I have done 10 minutes. 10 more? Wow. So really quickly. If you're doing this is, I don't know how many, sorry? Okay, thank you. So if you're doing this, you probably will see errors like a terrible error has happened, data. I don't know how many times I've seen this in programs. So quite often you are capturing an exception and logging that exception, but what is happening is logging the string representation of the exception, which for key errors is just the key that is missing, which is extremely frustrating. So what you probably want to do is pass xinfo, which we saw before, and you're going to see the full screen. I'm going to jump really quickly. We spoke a little bit about this. Now, we know how to use it. How do we configure it? Isn't it beautiful? I'll leave you 5 seconds. This is how you can configure the whole login engine. Isn't it great? So this is the basic, this is one of the ways you can configure it. You have all those parameters. By default, it's going to pin to console, but if you pass a file name, it's going to point to a file. You can go over all the parameters, but basically, this gives you same defaults. If you don't like the same defaults, there are 2 other ways to configure the login model. Well, there are 3. You can configure it via code, like just creating all the objects manually and wiring them. You can also configure it via a configuration file, which I don't like, so I won't show you. And the third one is you can configure it using the dict config. So dict config allows you to pass a dictionary with all the options. It can get even higher than this. I don't know if you have seen the login configuration on Django. That's actually what you are doing behind the hoods. You're using the dict config. I usually use, I personally prefer dict config, and I'll put this config in a YAML file. I'll load the YAML file, and then I pass it to the config. Cool. So here we can see you can define all the dict config formatters, handlers, and loggers. More in the documentation. So I want to show you that all I've said is true, and I have a demo. Yes, because there are not enough technical difficulties, right? So, and I have to type with one hand. So we are just going to see how a log line is going to go through all the code we explained already. So we are just going to import logging. We do basic config. We get the logger, and we just print it. And this is my cheat sheet. So we use Python 2.4. I'm joking. Python 3 minus MPDB. Oh, you don't see that? You probably want to see it. There you are. So, OK. Pa-pa-pum. OK, so what's the first thing we see? We are going to check if the logger is enabled for that level, right? It is, because we have it configured in info. And then we go to the inner function _log, which has all the interesting stuff. It's getting the strike info, source file, pa-pa-pum, gets the color info. And now we are creating this log record that we spoke about, right? So next, you can print with parentheses, because it's 3 record. So here you can see how does a log record looks like. Okay, so it has all the information that can capture around it, and also the string and the parameters that we passed. We go next. Oh. Have I gone inside? Sorry. Start again. Amazing. Don't do demo with a single hand. Next. No. Don't do demo with a single hand. I told you, Mario. So we go inside. Next. We create the log record here. Cool. And now we go into handle, which is not the handle class, but the handle method within the function. And what do we check? If the logger is enabled or not. And we check all the filters. Because they return true, then we are going to call all the handlers. And I'm running out of time. This is really interesting. I recommend you do it afterwards. I'm going to put it in the slides, but there is still more content to go over. And we have 5 minutes. I promise it will go through all we spoke, but there is no time. And I forgot the clicker. Okay. So let's see some use cases because this might be more interesting. So I'm going to jump over this one. Basically, you can define multiple handlers. Something I have on my web is I send to myself all the critical errors via email. I have a single file with all the error logs because I may want to see in 3 months what actually happened with the error logs. While for the info and debug only available in dev, I will just rotate them every 4 days, for example. So I keep only 4 days of logs. You can print JSON. Where would we do the JSON formatting? In the handler? No, in the formatter, right? So this is how you could configure your application to output JSON because you're on the hype and you know that logs should not be human readable and you prefer to send it to some kind of post-processing logs that will do a much better job if they take JSON. There is code. I'll try to upload it, and I don't have time to do the demo. Using filters to add context. If you are over Python 3.2, there is now a factory method you can configure to capture all the codes whenever a log record is created, and you can add some extra contextual information. If you are before 3.2, some kind of convention is you can overuse the filters to add information. So what is this doing? This is using a nice and global scary stuff that is going to be passed to, like all the logs are going to pass through here because we saw how the filters can be added to both loggers and handlers. And you can enrich it with something and then put it in your formatter. Where would you put it? In the logger or in the handler? If you want to do it for all the logs. Not everyone answering at the same time because I don't understand what you say. In the handler, we are right. Because if you do it in the logger, it will only happen for the parent one, right? Because we saw that with the hierarchy, you're going to call all your handlers and the handlers of your parents. But you are not going to execute the code of your parent. OK? More cool stuff, buffering. How many times you have an error? You have logged an error, and you wish you had only changed that debug log to info, right? So what this smart buffer handler is going to do is going to have buffering the previous log, in this case 1, and whenever it detects an error, it's going to not only log that error, but also the previous info. So you can do, for example, whenever there is an error, print the last 20 debug logs. Do I have time for the demo? Okay, so then let's jump in case you have questions. If you want to, let's say that you want to get only in def you want to log the result of a function only in def. I don't know why you would do that because you might have, for example, what's called a hasten bug, which is a bug that only happens when you have your logs in the bug. You can use this kind of pattern, which is that you create an object that will call your function only when you call a string. And that's it. Take away stop illegal logging in Amazonas. That was the talk about. But not really. Like the login model is, I think it's amazing. You can build on top of it as much as you want, and it's really. I love the way the what and the how is separated. It allows all your parts of the system to collaborate on login. So, for example, you saw how we did before this thing of enriching the context of the logger. So something you can do if you do that is not only that your logs are going to log that global scary stuff, is that also the library that you call are going to log it. So you're really separating the what and the how. And that's all. We have 2 minutes for questions. That's my guinea pig.
Has some question. Really a huge applause for Margo game because it was in the middle of everything. So we have a question here.
It seems that the login module does a lot, as you said. What is the performance impact?
So actually something really scary is that if, for example, this is why I say that more or less you can split the what and the how. If you have sending an email, it depends on the handler, but quite often everything happens synchronously. So it's really going to impact your performance. If you if you, for example, enable debug logs and you're debugging something in a for loop, it's really going to go to the buffer and then to the file on every single iteration. So, like, don't just ignore it. Be careful with logging. So it does have an impact, but I haven't measured it.
In normal performance, forget the debugging or something.
Yeah, so it depends on what you log, right? So you can see it depends on how much you log, but it does have an impact. How many milliseconds it's going to take? It depends on, for example, if you're sending an email, it's going to take longer if you log to a file. How long it takes to log to a file, it depends on your disk. So
there's another question. Just to give clarity.
What's your opinion about to use decorators for logging?
So to use like this thing where you put decorators on a function and then will log when it gets in and when it gets out with all the...
Yeah, because I heard that it's a great use case for decorators
So
for logging, yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that. It might be, I mean, it depends on your use case. I'm worried, you know, I personally prefer to write my own logs because the decorators, it feels more like I'm dumping this here, so then I'm going to get the information when I did it, whilst I really like to think about my logs. I really want to think on, you know, I want the logs to tell me a story, right? I want to go to my log files and see, I am doing this. I want to see value, because when you do the decorator, it worked great for today. But in 6 months, when you have a problem in production and you see this function name, which is do stuff, what was this thing doing, right? You can still go to the code, but if you can save the person, the sysadmin, which might not have any idea what's going on, if you can save that step to him, that's really valuable.
Thank you.
Okay. Did you solve the problem with multiprocessing logging? Because it's always an issue.
Yeah, you cannot do it. That's it. I mean, you would have to do like you cannot use the normal. You cannot use something that is logging to a file. Like you cannot use a normal handler that will log to a file from two different processes because they will share the file descriptor, right?
Yes, but for std out now, for example.
The problem is they will. That might actually. meh. I mean, I have had that issue before, and what I've done is I would log via TCP to another process, which is actually going to collect all the login. Sorry?
Excuse me.
Yeah, so a lot of developers put just everything into log info, right? So just dump the different variables and parameters. So one of the approaches to solve this problem is to use struct logs. I don't know if you know the struct log.
Can you say that again?
Struct logs, so structure logging.
Yeah.
So how is your view on solving this problem so that developer just put everything into it? Do you use structure logging or how's your approach to that?
So this fragment where I'm logging JSON, it actually comes from there. I was shuffling it, and then you can process it afterward and choose what you want to see, how do you want to see it. Thing is, I'm still maybe old school using log files. Not that I like it, but my environment is what we have. And at home. At work, for example, we use things like Splunk and more convenient thing. So if you have the infrastructure to do like structured logging where you can log JSON and then parse it and accumulate it and whatever you want, go for it. If you are going to do an app at home that you're going to log files, or even your company doesn't have that and you're still griping through log files, you really don't want to read JSON, right? But I think it's cool. Like I think if you know what we do today as well is we log into a file and then we parse it. If you can save that, it makes total sense. Yeah.
To your comment on to your comment on don't have a call that just says do stuff. So one best practice I heard was always have at least enough hierarchical naming that you can see what object.
Sorry, I don't.
To your comment that don't just have a logging message that says do stuff. A best practice I heard is preserve at least enough levels of hierarchical naming on the object that you can unambiguously see what called and when. And I had a question for you. What is the guarantee you can format millisecond resolution on timing, but what is your actual guarantee about the order and the accuracy, platform level accuracy of the timing and logging messages, especially if it has to ripple up through multiple parents? So
did you ask if it guarantees that things will go to the file in the same order that you log? Was that the question?
Supposedly it's guaranteed that in a single threaded process stuff is in order, but the millisecond timings may still be inaccurate. So what's your level of expectation about the actual accuracy of the millisecond timings? What can you trust? Is it good to the nearest 10 millisecond or 100 or?
Sorry, I'm not sure I understand the question. Did you ask, maybe the mic?
I'll catch you off.
Yeah, if you don't mind, if you can talk with him later, okay? And thank you so much for everyone, and another applause for Mario.